This Japanese man had just smiled sweetly at me in English, but 5 minutes later, thinking I didn't understand, he whispered in Japanese, "This old fool doesn't even know how to hold sushi chopsticks." He didn't know that I had lived in Kyoto for 2 years and knew Japanese better than he did. The fact that I answered him in the same language made my daughter's fiancé turn pale and fall silent forever. Before we continue, please subscribe to the channel and write in the comments what time it is where you are now. Kenji's eyes moved across my dining room like a realtor doing a mental appraisal, and that's when I first felt it, something sharp and wrong beneath his charming smile. The expression lasted maybe 2 seconds before his attention returned to my daughter Sarah, his hand finding hers on the table, but I'd caught it. 35 years of teaching undergraduates had trained me to spot dishonesty, and this felt like watching a student fabricate a citation, hoping I wouldn't check. That morning, I'd driven to Japantown and ordered $200 worth of sushi from Kura, the place I'd been going to since the 90s. I'd wiped down the mahogany table, set out my mother's bone china, arranged the serving platters just so. Sarah had called me 3 days earlier, her voice bright with something I hadn't heard in years. "Dad, I'm bringing someone really important. I think you'll love him." She was 32. After her last relationship ended badly 2 years ago, I'd watched her retreat into work, into safe routines. This new lightness in her voice had made me order extra hamachi. Now Kenji sat across from me, his posture perfect, his navy blazer expensive but not ostentatious. He'd arrived with a bottle of sake that probably cost more than my electric bill, presented it with both hands, thanked me for the invitation with exactly the right blend of respect and warmth. Sarah practically glowed beside him, her fingers wrapped around his arm like she'd found something solid after years of swimming. "Mr. Thompson," Kenji said, setting down his chopsticks. Awkwardly, I noticed, holding them like someone who'd learned from YouTube videos rather than family dinners. "Sarah tells me you taught Japanese literature at Berkeley for over 3 decades. That must have been fascinating work." It had its moments. I poured sake into his cup, following the traditional protocol, watching to see if he'd know to return the gesture. He did, but his execution was slightly off, the angle wrong. "Your English is excellent. How long have you been in the States?" "About 8 years now." His smile widened. "San Francisco felt like home immediately. The energy here, the opportunities in finance. I work as a senior analyst at Greenfield Partners downtown. We handle portfolio management, investment strategies for high-net-worth individuals." Sarah beamed at him. "Kenji's being modest. He manages accounts worth millions." "The financial sector here is competitive," Kenji continued, "but I've built a stable position. I believe in security, planning for the future. Family legacy matters." Family legacy? The phrase landed oddly, like a wrong note in music. Not building a legacy, just legacy, as if it were something already existing, something to be acquired rather than created. I watched him glance around the room again, his gaze catching on the vintage California landscape painting above the sideboard, the walnut bookshelf my father had built. When he complimented the house's great bones and investment potential, I felt my jaw tighten. Not, "it feels like a home," or "you can sense the history here." Investment potential. I deliberately fumbled with my own chopsticks, letting a piece of tuna roll onto my plate clumsily. It was theater. I'd spent 2 years at Kyoto University in the 90s, lived with a host family in a traditional neighborhood, learned to use chopsticks before I could write my name in hiragana. But I wanted him comfortable, wanted him to think he'd fooled the old professor with his surface-level charm. The gesture cost me nothing, and his grateful smile in return told me everything. He thought I was buying it. Sarah reached over and squeezed my hand. "I know this is fast, Dad, but when you know, you know. Kenji makes me feel safe, supported, and he respects you so much. He insisted we tell you first before anyone else." I looked at her face, saw the happiness there, and remembered teaching her to use chopsticks when she was 7 years old. She'd laughed in frustration, dropping edamame all over the kitchen table, and I'd been patient, encouraging. That memory, her small hands trying so hard, her trust in me, sat next to this moment like a weight. "I appreciate that," I told them both, raising my sake cup. "To new beginnings." We drank. Kenji's phone buzzed against the table. He glanced at the screen and something flickered across his face. annoyance, maybe concern, before his mask settled back into place. "Excuse me. Business call? I should take this." He stood, moving toward the sliding glass door that led to my small terrace. "Work never stops in finance." Sarah leaned close after he'd stepped outside, leaving the door open just a crack. "See? He's so dedicated. That's what I love about him. He takes responsibility seriously." I nodded, but my eyes stayed on that half-open door, on Kenji's back as he paced the terrace's narrow width, phone pressed to his ear. Through the gap, I could hear the low murmur of his voice, the rhythm of his words, and something in my chest went very still. Because the language coming through that opening wasn't English. It was Japanese. The words reached me clearly through the evening air, each syllable perfectly audible. Kenji's Japanese was fluent, casual, nothing like the carefully modulated English he'd been speaking all night. I heard him laugh, a sound completely different from the warm chuckles he'd offered across my dinner table. This laugh had edges. "Takeshi, just a bit longer," he said in Japanese, his voice carrying the irritation of someone forced to maintain an exhausting performance. "The old fool doesn't suspect a thing. Spent 200 on sushi trying to impress me. His house is worth over $1 million. Richmond district, prime location, plus whatever retirement money he saved from 35 years teaching. I can put up with his patronizing dinner parties. Once we're married, the green card is locked in. California community property laws. I'll get half of everything if we divorce. And if the old man dies while we're married and Sarah inherits, even better. My visa expires in November. The September wedding timing works perfectly." I stopped breathing. My wine glass hung suspended halfway to my lips, and I carefully, very carefully, set it back down without making a sound. 35 years of teaching Japanese. 2 years living in Kyoto's Higashiyama ward. Every word he'd spoken was clear as bells. No room for misunderstanding, no possible misinterpretation. The academic part of my brain cataloged the details. California Community Property Division, visa expiration, calculated timeline. The father part of my brain felt something cold and dense settle into my stomach. Sarah was still talking beside me, oblivious, her voice bright with wedding plans. "I'm thinking September, maybe early fall when the weather's nice. What do you think, Dad? Would Kenji's family come from Japan, or is that too much to ask?" She scrolled through something on her phone, showing me venue photos I wasn't really seeing. "The Presidio has this beautiful spot overlooking the bay. We could do the ceremony outdoors, maybe cherry blossom arrangements as a nod to his heritage." Cherry blossoms. The irony would have been funny if my daughter's future wasn't crumbling in real time on my terrace. I made sounds of agreement, nodding at appropriate moments, while my mind recorded every word still filtering through that half-open door. Kenji mentioned dollar amounts, property values, inheritance timelines. Each word was a nail, precise and deliberate. Then the conversation ended. I heard him say something about calling again next week, heard the shuffle of him pocketing his phone. Sarah looked up, expectant, still radiant. I arranged my face into pleasant neutrality as Kenji stepped back inside, sliding the door shut behind him. His expression had transformed again. All warmth, all gratitude. The perfect prospective son-in-law. "Sorry about that," he said, settling back into his chair like he'd never left. "Client emergency, but it's handled now. Thank you for your patience, Mr. Thompson. And thank you for this evening, for welcoming me into your home. In Japanese culture, family approval means everything. I promise to honor Sarah and cherish what you've built here." What you've built here. The words sat between us like stones. Not become part of your family, or take care of your daughter. What you've built, as if my house, my life, my savings were assets in a ledger he'd already totaled. I smiled at him. Then in Japanese, I said clearly, "Kotoshi no sakura wa kirei desu ne." This year's cherry blossoms are beautiful. The phrase was innocuous, simple, seasonal small talk any Japanese speaker might offer. But I delivered it in flawless, Kansai-accented Japanese. The pitch patterns of someone who'd studied at Kyoto University, who'd lived in traditional neighborhoods, who'd spent years parsing classical poetry and modern literature in the original language. For a single heartbeat, Kenji's face went blank. Pure shock flickered through his eyes, Comprehension, then fear, then frantic calculation, before his smile reconstructed itself. Yes, he answered in English, his voice slightly higher than before. Spring is lovely. Sarah glanced between us, puzzled. You speak Japanese, Dad. You never told me that. Picked up a few phrases during my research years, I said mildly, cutting another piece of sashimi. Nothing impressive. But Kenji knew. I watched him process it, watched him understand that I'd heard everything, that I'd understood every word on that terrace, that the foolish old man fumbling with chopsticks was not who he'd thought. He recovered admirably. Years of practiced deception make people smooth, but his hand trembled slightly when he reached for his water glass. We finished dinner in a strange new tension that only Kenji and I felt. Sarah chattered about venue ideas, guest lists, flowers. Kenji responded appropriately, but I noticed he didn't meet my eyes directly anymore. When they finally left around 9, Sarah driving him back to his apartment in Oakland, she hugged me at the door. Thank you for being so welcoming, Dad. I knew you'd like him. I watched her taillights disappear down the street. Then I walked back inside and stood in my kitchen, staring at the sake bottle Kenji had brought. Premium brand, I recognized the label. $120 retail. Investment, not gift. Everything was calculation. I left it unopened on the counter and walked to my study. Tomorrow morning I would begin. Not with confrontation, that would only push Sarah into defensive loyalty, make her choose between her father and her fiancé, and she'd choose him because that's what love does. No, I needed evidence, documentation, the methodical approach I'd used for 3 decades teaching students how to analyze complex texts, how to trace themes through layers of meaning, how to build arguments that couldn't be dismissed. Kenji wanted to play games with language and culture. He'd chosen the wrong professor to deceive. I didn't sleep that night. I lay in bed replaying every syllable Kenji had spoken on my terrace, his voice casual and contemptuous. The old fool, his house worth over $1 million, California community property laws. Each phrase had been delivered with the precision of someone who'd researched angles, calculated outcomes, planned an acquisition disguised as romance. By 4 in the morning, I'd stopped trying to sleep. I went to my study and opened a new folder on my desktop, labeled it Research Property Law. Innocuous enough if Sarah dropped by unexpectedly. Inside that folder, I began documenting everything with the same methodology I'd taught graduate students for 3 decades. Dates, direct quotes, sources. Kenji's exact words in Japanese followed by English translation. The visa expiration he'd mentioned, November 2025. The September wedding timeline. I treated it like scholarly analysis because that's what it was. Evidence gathering for a conclusion I needed to prove beyond reasonable doubt. Over the next 3 days, I started with what anyone could find. LinkedIn showed Kenji worked at Meridian Financial Partners, a mid-tier firm downtown, not the prestigious operation he'd implied over dinner. His profile listed 3 years there, no advanced degrees, maybe a dozen connections. I cross-referenced salary data for senior analysts in San Francisco, probably $85,000 to $95,000. Comfortable, but Sarah made more as a product manager. She'd mentioned her salary once, proud of reaching 6 figures at 32, $145,000. The financial calculus shifted in my mind. He wasn't bringing stability to her life. She was the prize he'd targeted. I researched H-1B visas next, using the public library's database access. My retired faculty status still granted me entry to academic resources, and I spent hours reading immigration law summaries. H-1B required employer sponsorship. Valid 6 years maximum, with possible extensions if green card application was pending. Marriage to a U.S. citizen provided the fastest path to permanent residency. File for adjustment of status immediately after marriage. Green card typically approved within a year. The timeline made brutal sense now. September wedding gave Kenji 2 months cushion before his November visa expiration. Enough time to file paperwork, establish legal marriage, secure his status before his work authorization collapsed. On the 4th day, I drove to Japantown, ordered takeout from Kura, where Hiroshi Tanaka, the owner, had known me since my Berkeley teaching days in the 90s. We'd had countless conversations about Japanese literature, cultural preservation, the changing neighborhood. Walter-san, he greeted me, wiping down the counter. Your usual? Actually, I wanted to ask you something. I kept my tone light, conversational. My daughter Sarah is engaged to a young man from Japan, Kenji Yamamoto, works in finance downtown. You know how small this community can be. I thought you might have crossed paths. Hiroshi's expression shifted slightly, something careful entering his eyes. He glanced toward the back of the restaurant, then back to me. Yamamoto-san, yes, I've seen someone by that name. Late evenings sometimes. The pause stretched. I waited. Walter, you've been coming here 20 years, Hiroshi said quietly. Some establishments in Japantown, they're not what they appear. I've seen men lose more than money there. I absorbed this, nodded slowly. I appreciate you telling me. He seems like a nice young man in daylight, Hiroshi added, almost apologetically. But nights tell different stories. I thanked him, took my takeout, drove home with my mind working through implications. Gambling, late-night establishments, men losing more than money. Another piece of the pattern, another calculated risk Kenji was taking while planning to marry my daughter. Sarah called that evening, bubbling with venue ideas. Then carefully she asked, Dad, I know this is huge, but could you help with the wedding costs? Maybe 50,000. Kenji's family situation is complicated. They can't contribute right now. $50,000. I thought of Kenji's forum posts I hadn't yet discovered, his debts I didn't yet know about, his gambling habits Hiroshi had just hinted at. Of course, sweetheart, let me make some arrangements. These things take a few weeks to organize properly. Thank you. Kenji said you'd understand. He really admires your generosity. After we hung up, I sat staring at my phone. Kenji had anticipated this, had probably suggested Sarah ask me. Another calculation, another asset to access. The next week, I attended a cherry blossom reception at the Japanese Cultural Center. Professional networking event. Academics and business people mingling over sake and small plates. I listened more than I talked, asking occasional questions about young Japanese professionals in the financial sector. Someone mentioned the stress of visa renewals. Someone else alluded to those who come here looking for shortcuts. I absorbed it all, filed it away. By day 10, I'd compiled a decent preliminary picture. Kenji's visa expired in November. He worked at an unremarkable firm. Sarah made more money than he did. He had gambling connections, and his wedding timeline was suspiciously urgent. Sarah mentioned during another call that Kenji had suggested moving the date to August instead of September. He wants to start our married life sooner, she'd said, voice soft with happiness. I'd suggested that seemed rushed. Maybe September was better for planning. She'd agreed reluctantly. But what I had was circumstantial, suspicions and timeline analysis and vague warnings from restaurant owners. Nothing Sarah couldn't dismiss as prejudice, as her father being overprotective and distrustful. I needed concrete proof, documents, verification, the kind of evidence that couldn't be argued away. I opened my laptop and typed into Google, Private Investigator San Francisco Bay Area. 3 searches later, I was reading reviews. One name kept appearing with 5-star ratings. Marcus Webb, former SFPD detective. Discreet and thorough. The flat rate quoted online was $3,500 for a standard background investigation. 2 weeks of work. I picked up my phone. Sarah's future was worth infinitely more than $3,500. The coffee shop Marcus Webb chose was in the financial district, anonymous and busy. He looked exactly like a retired detective should, mid-50s, gray hair cropped short, eyes that assessed everything. We sat in the back corner. I'd brought a folder with what I'd compiled. Timeline, visa information, the facts I'd verified. I've been doing this 20 years, Marcus said, scanning my notes. Most background checks on fiancés come back clean, maybe some minor issues. But you're worried about something specific. He's marrying her 2 months before his work visa expires. The timing is too convenient. Marcus nodded slowly. Immigration fraud is federal. If that's what this is, you're potentially looking at someone facing serious consequences. I need to know what we're dealing with. Can you find out? That's exactly what I do. He quoted his rate. $3,500 standard package. 2 weeks of work. I wrote a check for $1,500 as deposit. He warned me. Sometimes clients don't like what we find. Are you prepared for that? I'd rather know the ugly truth than believe a beautiful lie. While Marcus worked, I continued my own research. At the library, I accessed PACER, the federal court database, and California civil court records. Searched Kenji Yamamoto plus San Francisco plus civil cases. Found 2 small claims judgments, $4,200 to a credit card company in June 2023, $3,800 to a personal loan company that September, both unpaid. I photographed the records with my phone, added them to my evidence folder at home. The dates mattered. The judgments predated Sarah. Kenji's financial crisis had existed before he targeted my daughter. A week later, I stopped at a Mission District cafe for lunch. The barista, a young woman whose name tag read Jen, made my coffee. I noticed her glance at my San Francisco State alumni pin, mentioned she'd attended there briefly. Casual conversation, nothing significant, until I mentioned my daughter was marrying someone who worked in finance. Kenji Yamamoto, I said. Her face froze. The smile vanished. After a long moment, she said carefully, I knew a Kenji Yamamoto. If it's the same person, be careful. She went on break 10 minutes later. I waited, and when she returned, she told me her story. Jennifer Chang. She introduced herself formally this time. She'd dated Kenji for 8 months in 2023. He'd borrowed $5,000 for an emergency family situation in Japan, promised repayment in 3 months, then ghosted her completely, changed his number, blocked her on social media. She'd tried small claims court, won a judgment, but he had no assets to collect against. He told me his mother needed surgery, Jennifer said, bitter laugh in her voice. Insurance wouldn't cover it. I had that money saved for grad school. He promised. She looked at me directly. He was so charming, so convincing, until he got what he wanted. You weren't stupid, I told her. You were kind. He exploited that. If he's marrying your daughter, maybe warn her. He's really good at making people believe him. I thanked her, bought her lunch, left thinking about patterns. The loan, the unpaid judgments, the gambling hints from Hiroshi. Kenji was drowning financially, and Sarah was his life raft. Marcus called on day 12. I've got preliminary findings. Can you come by my office? His space in Soma was small, professional, walls lined with filing cabinets. He spread photos across his desk, surveillance shots of Kenji entering an unmarked building in Oakland. 3 different nights over 2 weeks, timestamps showing 11 p.m., midnight, 1 a.m. This building is known to us, Marcus said. Illegal gambling establishment, high-stakes poker, mostly Asian clientele, cash-only operations. Your guy goes there 2, sometimes 3 nights per week. He laid out more documentation. Credit card balances totaling $35,000, personal loans at $22,000, and then carefully, my source in that community says he owes money to the poker operators, about $10,000, maybe more. These aren't people you want to owe money to. How desperate is he? Desperate enough to make bad decisions, like marrying someone for immigration status and hoping her father's inheritance solves his debt problem. Marcus pulled out printed pages next. Found these on an immigration forum, user Tokyo Finance Guy 455, posted 6 months ago. He slid them across. I read the thread. Need advice. H-1B expires in 1 year. Employer won't sponsor green card. Dating American citizen. How fast can marriage lead to green card? What's minimum marriage duration before divorce doesn't look suspicious? The responses discuss timelines, community property laws, inheritance considerations. Kenji's reply, got it. So marriage plus patience equals permanent status, plus financial stability. The calculation was explicit, written down, public, traceable through IP addresses, Marcus had confirmed, matched Kenji's apartment. That evening I sat in my study with everything spread before me. Court judgments proving financial irresponsibility. Jennifer Chang's testimony establishing a pattern of fraud. Surveillance photos documenting ongoing gambling addiction. Forum posts revealing premeditated intent to commit visa fraud. $67,000 in documented debt, probably more I hadn't found yet. This wasn't circumstantial anymore. This was prosecutable. But showing Sarah this folder would backfire. She'd accuse me of sabotaging her happiness, hiring investigators to destroy her relationship, being a controlling father who couldn't let her grow up. She was in love. Love makes people defend the indefensible. I needed another approach, patience, more observation. Let Kenji make mistakes while I documented everything. Eventually, Sarah would see cracks in his performance. Eventually, the truth would become undeniable. I closed the folder. Tomorrow I'd continue as if nothing had changed. The wedding planning, the supportive father, the generous contributor, while I waited for the perfect moment to make my daughter see who she'd really fallen for. The barbecue was at Linda Morrison's house in Oakland, one of Sarah's colleagues, a cheerful woman who'd organized the gathering to celebrate the start of summer. Sarah had insisted I come. "Dad, everyone wants to meet you, and Kenji will be there. You two can bond properly this time." I arrived with a bottle of wine and my best pleasant father expression. The backyard was full of Sarah's work friends, music playing from outdoor speakers, the smell of grilling burgers and chicken filling the air. Kenji stood near the grill with his arm around Sarah's waist, laughing at something someone had said. He saw me, raised his beer in greeting, the picture of the devoted fiancé. I made small talk, helped arrange food on serving tables, watched Kenji work the crowd. He mentioned his finance career downtown to 3 different people, dropped hints about the September wedding, played his role flawlessly. Mid-afternoon, his phone rang. I was near the kitchen doorway, carrying a bowl of potato salad outside, when I saw him check the screen. His expression flickered, something sharp and urgent, before he smiled at Sarah and gestured toward the garden area. "Work call. Be right back." Sarah nodded indulgently. "He's so dedicated." The garden was 20 feet from where I stood, separated by a rose trellis, but open enough that sound carried. I set down the potato salad slowly, arranging utensils that didn't need arranging, and listened. Japanese, clear and unguarded. "Takeshi, listen, just a bit longer. This naive American actually thinks I love her." Kenji's voice held amusement, contempt. The sex is tolerable, but the rest? Exhausting. All her feelings, her need for constant reassurance. But September isn't far now. I kept my hands steady on the serving spoons. The father? Old fool sitting on a fortune. His Richmond district house is worth at least $1 million. I checked the property records. Retirement savings probably $500,000 more from all those years teaching. After we marry, I get the green card. Wait 1 year to avoid obvious fraud, then file for divorce. California's community property law, I've researched it thoroughly, means I get half of everything she earns during the marriage. With her salary, that's over $70,000 for 1 year of pretending to be married. My vision narrowed to the rose trellis, the red blooms sharp against green leaves. "Better yet," Kenji continued, voice dropping to something almost gleeful, "if the old man dies while we're still married and Sarah inherits, I'm legally entitled to a portion of that inheritance as community property. I've verified this with online legal forms. The more I think about it, the more brilliant this plan becomes. Clear my gambling debts. What are we at now? 71,000. And return to Tokyo with money in my pocket. My father will finally respect me." Laughter, easy, confident, triumphant. "She'll never see it coming. None of them will. By this time next year, I'll have permanent residency status and enough money to start fresh. She can keep her broken heart and her empty bank account." The call ended. I heard him pocket his phone, adjust his clothing, take a breath before returning to the party. When he stepped back onto the patio, his smile was warm, his hand immediately finding Sarah's. She leaned into him, trusting and happy. I carried the potato salad to the table, set it down carefully, smiled at Linda Morrison when she thanked me, made a joke about portion sizes. Inside, I was cataloging every word Kenji had spoken. Naive American, old fool with a fortune, 1 year then divorce, community property calculations, inheritance angles, gambling debts at 71,000 now, plans to return to Tokyo. The phrases were seared into memory with academic precision. As the afternoon wound down and guests started leaving, I hugged Sarah goodbye, shook Kenji's hand, noted how his grip was confident, unconcerned. Then casually, "Sarah, remind me, when are you meeting with my attorney? We should update those family documents." Sarah looked puzzled. "What documents? You didn't mention anything." "Estate planning matters. Nothing urgent, just routine maintenance." I kept my tone mild, conversational. "We can discuss it later this week." Kenji's smile froze for a fraction of a second. His eyes sharpened. Estate planning? Is everything all right, Mr. Thompson? I met his gaze steadily. Everything's fine, just being prudent. You understand the importance of legal preparation, I'm sure, given your work in finance. Something passed between us. Recognition, calculation, wariness. Then his charm snapped back into place. Of course. Very wise. I drove home through East Bay traffic, my mind replaying the conversation. Not just disrespect now. Premeditated fraud with specific legal strategy. He'd researched California marriage laws, calculated inheritance scenarios, planned divorce timing down to the year. My daughter wasn't his love. She was paperwork and a bank account. At home, I sat in my study and opened a note on my phone. Typed out everything he'd said, word for word in Japanese, then English translation. Saved it with timestamp and location. Then I opened my browser and searched. California Family Law, Attorney San Francisco. First result, Richard Fletcher, Esquire. Family Law and Asset Protection. 30 years experience. Office downtown. Strong reviews praising his thoroughness, his strategic thinking, his success protecting clients' assets. I wrote down his number. Tuesday morning, I'd call for a consultation. Kenji thought he'd planned everything. Researched laws, calculated timelines, identified his target's vulnerabilities. But he'd never faced a father who'd spent 3 decades teaching strategy through careful analysis of language and culture. He'd made one critical miscalculation, speaking Japanese to reveal his scheme. The real game was just beginning. Richard Fletcher's office occupied the 15th floor of a financial district high-rise with views across Market Street. Tuesday morning, I arrived with my evidence folder, 3 inches thick with documentation. Fletcher was 58, gray hair precisely trimmed, sharp eyes behind wire-rimmed glasses. Former prosecutor turned family law specialist. He gestured to leather chairs. Mr. Thompson, you mentioned potential fraud concerns regarding your daughter's marriage. I opened the folder. My daughter Sarah is marrying Kenji Yamamoto in September. I believe he's using her for immigration status and financial gain. I laid out everything, relationship timeline, both overheard Japanese conversations with my translations, Marcus Webb's investigator report, court records showing unpaid judgments, Jennifer Chang's testimony about the $5,000 loan fraud, screenshots of forum posts discussing marriage for green card strategies. Fletcher read everything without interruption, making notes on yellow legal pad. When he finished, Mr. Thompson, in 30 years of family law practice, I've seen calculated exploitation. This is one of the most methodical. He's researched community property laws, planned timelines, targeted your daughter for her income and your assets. Can we protect her legally? We can. A properly drafted prenuptial agreement would neutralize his entire strategy, but she has to agree to it, and he has to sign it. That's the complication. Fletcher explained California's community property system with precision. Without prenuptial agreement, anything Sarah earned during marriage belonged equally to both spouses. Her $145,000 salary meant Kenji could claim roughly $72,000 after 1 year, plus half of any appreciation in her Oakland apartment, potentially $30,000 to $50,000 in this market. If I died during their marriage and she inherited my estate, he'd have legal claim to a portion as community property. So his plan is legally viable. Completely. That's what makes this dangerous. The prenuptial agreement is your defensive line. Fletcher proposed 2-pronged strategy. Draft the most comprehensive prenuptial possible, protecting all Sarah's premarital assets, future income, and any inheritance. Include provisions that if marriage ended within 3 years, Kenji received nothing, no assets, no support, no claims. Second, begin planting doubt through Sarah's trusted friends, preparing her to consider legal protection without direct paternal pressure that would trigger defensive loyalty. The prenuptial itself will be a test, Fletcher added. If he refuses to sign, his intentions become obvious. His fees were $450 per hour, estimated $8,500 total for drafting, agreement, revision sessions, consultations. I wrote check for $5,000 as retainer, without hesitation. Draft the strongest protection possible. My daughter's future is worth any cost. Fletcher promised initial draft within 1 week. Over following days, I implemented his secondary strategy. Linda Morrison, Sarah's colleague, lunch Tuesdays at a Mission District caf. That week I arrived at noon, ordered coffee, acted pleasantly surprised when Linda entered. Walter, what are you doing in this neighborhood? Dentist appointment nearby. Join me? We talked about Sarah, the wedding. I asked Linda's impression of Kenji, keeping tone casual, fatherly concerned rather than accusatory. Linda was diplomatic, but honest. He's charming. Very charming. But Sarah mentioned he's been asking questions about your family, your house, your finances, her inheritance prospects. It feels less like getting to know you and more like due diligence. She paused. My ex did that before he proposed. Turned out he had serious gambling debts. If you ever hear anything concerning about his background, visa status, financial issues, would you mention it to Sarah? Not as suspicion, just friend-to-friend information. Of course, Linda said, looking troubled. I want her going into this with eyes open. Days later, Sarah stopped by to show wedding invitation samples. I'd left my tablet on kitchen counter, screen showing article. Marriage fraud red flags. When immigration status drives relationships. Deliberate placement, seemingly accidental, Sarah noticed. Dad, why are you reading about immigration marriage fraud? A colleague's daughter went through terrible situation last year, I said, voice carefully neutral. Met someone on visa. Rushed engagement. Turned out he was using her for green card status. Cost her emotionally and financially. Made me think about protecting the people we love. That's not Kenji, Sarah said, but her voice held slightest edge of uncertainty. I'm sure it's not, sweetheart. But legal protection before marriage is smart regardless. Has nothing to do with trust, everything to do with prudence. I let that sit. If Kenji loves you, he'd want you protected too. She didn't respond, just looked at invitation samples with slightly less enthusiasm than before. Late May evening, Fletcher's preliminary draft arrived via email. 20 pages of legal fortress. Sarah's apartment remained separate property. All premarital assets protected. Future income and inheritance shielded. If marriage ended within 3 years, Kenji received 0 assets, 0 support, 0 claims. Fletcher's cover note read, this agreement neutralizes his entire financial strategy. If he signs, you've protected her. If he refuses, you've exposed him. I made margin notes, suggested strengthening inheritance protection clause, then opened my calendar, counted forward to early July, 2 months before planned September wedding. I'd invite Sarah and Kenji for important family conversation. Present prenuptial not as accusation, but as standard protection for anyone with significant assets entering marriage. I emailed Fletcher, this is excellent. Let's finalize by mid-June. I'll need guidance on presenting this to my daughter without pushing her away. His response came within minutes. I'll prepare talking points. Remember, you're not attacking her choice. You're protecting her future. There's a difference, and we'll make her see it. I closed laptop. The pieces were in place. Kenji's confidence was his weakness. He thought he'd planned everything, researched every angle, anticipated every obstacle, but he'd never faced someone who loved Sarah more than he wanted her money, and that made all the difference. I called Sarah midweek. I'd like you and Kenji to come for dinner Sunday evening. There's something important we need to discuss before the wedding. My tone was serious, but calm. She agreed, voice uncertain. Sunday arrived. I'd prepared a simple meal, nothing elaborate like our first dinner. This was business, not celebration. The dining room table held 3 glasses of water and a leather folder containing Fletcher's prenuptial agreement. No wine. I wanted everyone clear-headed. They arrived at 6. Sarah looked hopeful, perhaps thinking this was reconciliation. Kenji's smile was in place, but his eyes kept darting to that leather folder. Smart man. He sensed something. We ate. Small talk. Weather, work, wedding venue logistics. When dishes were cleared, I placed the folder on the table and opened it. Sarah, Kenji, I've consulted with a family law attorney. Before any marriage involving significant assets, it's standard practice to have legal protection in place. I turned the document so Sarah could see it. I've had a prenuptial agreement prepared. Sarah's face went through several expressions. Confusion, shock, hurt. Dad? What? A prenup? This protects your assets, sweetheart. Your Oakland apartment, your savings, your future income, any inheritance from me. These remain yours regardless of what happens in the marriage. Kenji's charming mask cracked. His jaw tightened. Mr. Thompson, this feels extreme. Sarah and I love each other. We're building a life together. Prenuptial agreements are for people who don't trust each other. They're for people who are prudent. I kept my voice even, professorial. Sarah's income exceeds $145,000 annually. She owns property. Without protection, California community property law means anyone she marries has claimed half of everything earned during the marriage. That's not about trust. That's legal reality. You're treating our marriage like a business transaction, Kenji said, edge creeping into his voice. I'm treating it like what it legally is, a contract with significant financial implications. Kenji stood, chair scraping back. This is insulting. You're implying I'm marrying Sarah for money. That's discriminatory. You wouldn't require this from an American fiancé. I remained seated, watching his white-knuckled grip on the table edge. I would ask this of anyone marrying my daughter, regardless of nationality. I paused deliberately. But since you mentioned it, your H-1B visa expires in November, doesn't it? 4 months after your planned September wedding. His face paled. What does that have to do with anything? Just noting that the timing is convenient. Marriage to a U.S. citizen allows adjustment of status. That's public information. Sarah looked between us, wounded and confused. Dad, are you suggesting... I spoke gently to her. I'm suggesting that before any major commitment, we ensure everyone's intentions are clear and everyone's protected. Kenji's voice rose. This is manipulative. You're using your money to control her. I let silence hang for a moment. Then in Japanese, Kenji-san, watashi wa Nihon, no bunka o sonke shiteimasu. Kazoku no zaisan o mamoru koto wa, dono bunka demo taisetsu desu ne. His face went blank. The reminder that I understood Japanese, that I wasn't the ignorant old fool from his phone conversations, hit him like cold water. I switched back to English. In Japan, the concept of maintaining the family, i.e., the household assets and lineage, is taken seriously. Prenuptial arrangements exist there too. So let's not pretend this is American peculiarity or sign of distrust. It's universal wisdom. That's different, Kenji managed. Is it? Sarah's eyes were wet. Dad, I can't believe you're doing this. You're making me choose. I'm not making you choose anything, sweetheart. I'm asking Kenji to prove his love isn't conditional on access to your assets. If he truly loves you, signing this changes nothing. I let the implication hang. If he refuses, I slid the document across the table. Read it carefully. Discuss it together. Have Kenji's own attorney review it. I encourage that. But understand, this isn't optional. If you marry without this protection, I cannot support the wedding financially or emotionally. That's my final position. The evening ended badly. Sarah left in tears, Kenji's arm around her, shooting me a look of pure hatred. I stood in my doorway watching them drive away. The prenuptial folder was gone. They'd taken it. That was something. My phone buzzed. Fletcher. How did it go? I typed back. He took the bait. Now we see if he's smart enough to sign or desperate enough to refuse. The chess pieces were in position. Now I waited for Kenji's next move. 3 days of silence. The longest Sarah and I had gone without speaking since she'd left for college. I checked my phone constantly, fighting the urge to call. Fletcher's voice echoed. Patience, patience. Day 4, she finally called. Her voice was strained, distant. Dad, we've discussed the prenup. Kenji won't sign it. I waited. He says it's racist, that you're treating him this way because he's Japanese, because he's an immigrant. He feels insulted and disrespected. I heard Kenji's words coming through Sarah's mouth, his talking points, his framing. And what do you think? I think it's insulting to him, like you don't trust my judgment. I trust your judgment about character. I don't trust that everyone shows their true character up front. The prenup isn't about Kenji personally. It's about protecting you legally. But he says you wouldn't require this from an American fiancé? Sarah, would you sign a prenup if you were marrying someone with significantly more assets than you? To protect both parties? She hesitated. I guess that would make sense. Then why doesn't it make sense when you're the one with assets to protect? She had no answer for that. Later that evening, she called again. Kenji thinks we should postpone the wedding. He says he can't marry into a family that doesn't respect him. I noted the tactical error immediately. Postpone until when? He didn't say exactly, just until things are better between you two. Sarah, your wedding is planned for September. His work visa expires in November. If you postpone past September, what happens to his immigration status? That has nothing to do with it, she said defensively. He just wants to start our marriage on positive terms. I'm sure that's what he said. But think about the timing. She hung up frustrated, but I heard the doubt creeping in. 2 days later, I called Linda Morrison, explained without revealing my full investigation that I was concerned about Kenji's financial situation and visa status. Linda agreed to share what she'd heard at work, naturally as a friend. That afternoon, Linda encountered Sarah at their usual lunch cafe. Later, Linda texted me a summary of the conversation. She'd mentioned casually that she'd overheard people at Meridian Financial talking, something about visa issues and gambling debts. Nothing specific, just enough to plant seeds. Sarah called me that evening, voice tight. Dad, have you been spreading rumors about Kenji? I haven't said anything to anyone about Kenji. Linda mentioned hearing things about gambling debts, about visa problems. I can't control what people say at his workplace, Sarah, but if multiple people are talking about the same concerns, maybe that's worth considering. She was silent for a long moment. Then, Kenji wants me to take a break from talking to you until after the wedding. He says the constant communication is keeping the tension alive. I let that sit. He wants you to stop talking to your father for 2 months? Not stop, just reduce. Give things space. Sarah, do you want to reduce contact with me? Her voice was small. No, but I don't want conflict either. Sweetheart, any partner who asks you to distance yourself from family who love you isn't thinking of your well-being. They're thinking of their control. He's not trying to control me, she said, but she was wavering. That night, Marcus Webb called with his surveillance update. Kenji's gambling had escalated dramatically. 5 visits to the Oakland Poker Club in the past week, up from his usual 2 or 3. Longer sessions, larger bets, visible agitation. Marcus's source reported Kenji's debt had climbed to $75,000, up $8,000 in 10 days. Whatever pressure he's under, Marcus said, it's making him reckless. He's trying to gamble his way out, only digging deeper. I recognized the pattern. Kenji needed this marriage more desperately than ever. That made him more dangerous, and more likely to make mistakes. I texted Sarah that night, I love you. I'm here when you're ready to talk. No judgment. No mention of Kenji. No mention of the prenup. Just unconditional support. 3 days later, my phone rang. Sarah, Dad, can we talk? Not about Kenji, about... I don't know. I just need to talk. Her voice was tired, uncertain. Something had shifted. Of course, sweetheart. Come over whenever you want. Door's always open. After we hung up, I sat in my study looking at Marcus's latest surveillance photos. Kenji at the poker club, face drawn and haggard, arguing with someone who looked like a debt collector. The mask was cracking. Kenji's desperation was making him visible. Fletcher was right. Every counter move Kenji made exposed him further. The isolation attempt had backfired. Sarah reached out to me, not away. I opened my evidence folder, made sure everything was organized. When Sarah was ready to know the full truth, I'd have everything she needed to see clearly. August was coming, and with it, the final reckoning. The doorbell rang at 11:40 at night. I wasn't asleep, hadn't been sleeping well for weeks, but the lateness still startled me. Through the peephole, Sarah, face ravaged by tears, but her expression was fury, not collapse. I opened the door. She held a phone in her hand, not her phone. Kenji's. Dad, I need to see everything. Everything you know about him. No preamble. No defense of Kenji. She'd arrived at the truth on her own terms. I brought her inside, made tea while she sat at the kitchen table staring at the phone screen. When I set the cup before her, she finally spoke. He left his phone when he rushed out earlier. My phone died. I needed to check work email. I used his. Her voice was flat, mechanical. A message came in, Japanese, from someone named Takeshi. I used Google Translate. She turned the phone toward me. The translated message read, Keep playing nice with the stupid American woman. Just a few more weeks until the wedding. I scrolled up, Sarah continued. Found months of conversations. He called me gullible, naive. discussed green card timelines, mentioned waiting for you to die so he could claim inheritance through me. I sat down across from her. I know. Her eyes met mine. You heard him. That first dinner, on the terrace. I heard him. I speak Japanese. She absorbed this. Then, show me everything. I want to know exactly who I almost married. I went to my study and returned with the evidence folder I'd maintained for 4 months, laid it out systematically. Marcus Webb's surveillance photos of Kenji at poker clubs, debt documentation showing $75,000 owed, court records of unpaid judgments, Jennifer Chang's written statement about the $5,000 loan fraud, visa expiration data, printouts of online forum posts asking how quickly marriage leads to green card, transcripts of both overheard Japanese conversations. Sarah read every page, asked questions about dates and sources, cross-referenced Kenji's lies with documented facts. By 3 a.m, she was exhausted but clear-eyed. He was going to marry me, wait exactly 1 year so it wouldn't look suspicious, then divorce me and take half of everything under community property law, plus whatever I inherited from you if... She couldn't finish. If I died during that year, I said gently. Yes, that was his plan. Her tears were anger now. Tomorrow we confront him. I want him to see that I know. The next morning, Sarah texted Kenji, "Come to my dad's house at 10 a.m. We need to talk about the wedding." He arrived cautiously hopeful, thinking perhaps she'd convinced me to back down on the prenup. He walked into my dining room and found Sarah, me, and Richard Fletcher sitting with the evidence folder open between us. His face went from hopeful to wary to trapped in 3 seconds. Sarah spoke first. "I found your phone last night. I read your messages with Takeshi. I know what you called me. I know what you planned." She produced translated screenshots. "Stupid American woman. Marry her, wait a year, divorce, get half under community property law." Kenji tried to laugh. "Sarah, that's just guys talking. Joking around. You don't understand the context." Google Translate was very clear. Her voice was ice. "That's not joking. That's fraud." He pivoted to explanations. Mistranslation, misunderstanding, taken out of context. But as Sarah produced piece after piece, the gambling debts, the court judgments, Jennifer Chang's story, the visa timeline, his defenses crumbled. He turned on me. "You spied on me. You hired investigators. This is entrapment." Fletcher spoke for the first time. "Mr. Yamamoto, everything here was obtained legally. Public records, lawful surveillance, voluntary witness statements. However, what you've done, researching marriage fraud, planning to exploit community property laws using marriage for immigration benefit, constitutes marriage fraud under federal law. Immigration fraud carries penalties including permanent visa denial, criminal charges, and deportation." Kenji's face went white. His final outburst was rage, switching between Japanese and English, shouting accusations of racism, threats of defamation lawsuits, but his fury only confirmed his guilt. I responded in Japanese. "Kenji-san, I gave you every chance to be honest. You chose deception." Then English. "This conversation is over. Please leave." His desperate final plea to Sarah. "Please, I can explain everything." "Get out," she said. "Don't contact me again. The engagement is over." After Kenji stormed out, we sat in silence. Sarah was trembling. Rage, relief, grief mixing together. Fletcher packed his documents. "I'll prepare a cease and desist letter. If he contacts you again, document everything." After Fletcher left, Sarah and I sat in the dining room where this had all begun. "Dad, I'm so sorry I didn't believe you. You tried to protect me and I stopped her. "You loved someone. That's not something to apologize for. I'm just glad we got here before the wedding." She leaned against my shoulder, exhausted. Outside, August sun brightened the garden. The hardest part was done. Now came the accounting. 3 days after the confrontation, Kenji called me from an unfamiliar number. His voice was different, desperation replacing charm. "Mr. Thompson, please. Can we talk? I'll return the ring, all the gifts. Just don't report me to immigration. I'll leave Sarah alone. I just need time to figure out my visa situation." "Kenji, you planned to marry my daughter for immigration status and financial gain. You researched how to maximize theft under community property law. You discussed waiting for me to die so you could claim inheritance. Those aren't misunderstandings. Those are crimes, he tried pleading, then threats of defamation lawsuits. I cut him off. File whatever you want. We have documentation. Your actions have consequences. You wanted to use my daughter as a ticket and a bank account. That doesn't go unpunished. With Sarah's authorization, Fletcher drafted an anonymous report to Kenji's employer. Documentation of $75,000 in gambling debts, involvement with illegal gambling establishments, financial instability, violating company ethics policy. He sent it via anonymous email, with attached public records and surveillance photos. Factual, verifiable, impossible to ignore. 2 weeks later, Kenji was terminated from Meridian Financial Partners. Official reason, ethics policy violation regarding undisclosed financial liabilities. His H-1B visa sponsorship was withdrawn immediately. Under immigration law, he had 60 days to find a new sponsor or leave the country. With his record, no company would touch him. Sarah learned of his firing through office gossip. Linda Morrison heard from contacts at Meridian. Sarah felt no triumph, just exhausted relief. It's really over. Late August, Kenji left for Japan. Couldn't afford to stay, couldn't get new visa sponsor, gambling debts still pressing. Word spread through professional networks about why he left so suddenly. His reputation was damaged. Back in Japan, he faced his debts and the knowledge that his brilliant plan had ended in complete failure. No dramatic final confrontation, just absence. The man who tried to con us was gone. A week after Kenji's departure, Sarah and I had dinner at my house. Peaceful. Normal. Dad, I need to say this properly. Her voice was steady. I'm sorry. You saw through him from that first dinner. I accused you of being controlling, of being prejudiced. You were protecting me, and I made you the villain. Sarah, let me finish. You hired investigators, consulted lawyers, gathered evidence, all while I was defending someone who called me stupid behind my back. I'm so sorry. Sweetheart, you were in love, or thought you were. Love makes us vulnerable. That's not weakness. But you were right. I was right about Kenji, but you needed to learn the truth on your own terms. If I'd just told you what I heard that first night, would you have believed me? She considered. No, I wouldn't have. Exactly. You needed evidence you could verify yourself. I'm just glad we got there before the wedding. She was crying now. Thank you for not giving up on me, even when I pushed you away. That's what parents do. We don't give up. Ever. September arrived. Life settled into healthier rhythm. Sarah joined a support group for people who'd experienced manipulative relationships, learning to recognize red flags, processing what happened, rebuilding trust in her own judgment. We had weekly dinners, more open with each other than before. I returned to routines I'd neglected, working in my garden, reading, accepting invitations I'd postponed. A former colleague from Berkeley asked me to guest lecture on cross-cultural communication. I accepted, found unexpected satisfaction in teaching again, sharing knowledge that had practical value. Mid-September, warm afternoon. Sarah helped me plant autumn mums in the garden. She'd started dating casually again, coffee with someone from Linda's office, no pressure. You know what's strange, she said, pressing soil around a chrysanthemum. I feel like I learned more in 4 months than in 4 years of college. About what? About judgment. About taking time to know people. About listening to people who love me when they have concerns. She paused. About my dad being smarter than I gave him credit for. I smiled. I had an unfair advantage. I speak Japanese. You had experience. You'd lived longer, seen patterns. I kept thinking your caution was overprotective. But you were just aware. She straightened, brushing dirt from her knees. Will you do something for me? When I start dating seriously again, will you meet them? And if you see red flags, will you tell me? Always. That's my job. She leaned against my shoulder. I'm lucky to have you. I'm lucky to have you too, sweetheart. That's why I couldn't let anyone hurt you. The garden glowed in afternoon light, autumn flowers ready to bloom. My daughter beside me, wiser now, stronger. The crisis had passed. What remained was understanding. Experience matters, wisdom has value, and protecting those you love is never wrong, even when they can't see the danger yet. I looked at Sarah, really looked. She caught my gaze. What? Nothing. Just glad you're here. She smiled, understanding without words. We returned to planting. Life continued. Justice served. Family protected. The story doesn't end with dramatic resolution. It ends with quiet peace, the most satisfying ending of all. If you like this story, please like this video, subscribe to the channel, and share your impressions of this story in the comments. To listen to the next story, click on the box on the left. Thank you for watching.